The Border Patrol is also involved not at the border, but in the interior of our country. That is not usual, and it has resulted, in the opinion of some of us, from the taking of American lives inconsistent with the safety of American citizens and inconsistent with the norms of police work in America, in our counties and in our cities and in our states.
The gentleman's time has expired.
So I hope, in conclusion, that we will vote on a motion to recommit, which funds all of the federal employees in question and represents honestly to the American people that the Customs Agency and ICE are already funded and were funded at the beginning of this year. Madam Speaker, I thank you for the additional seconds and yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Mann, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, farmers, ranchers, and agriculture producers are the backbone of this country. They wake up before the sun, work long after it sets, and take on risk every single day to feed, fuel, and clothe the world. Yet too often in Washington, we ask them to do that work without the certainty and stability that they deserve. The last fully enacted Farm Bill was passed in 2018. That might not seem like long ago in Washington, but in agriculture, 6 years is a lifetime. Input costs and inflation surged under the mismanagement of the last administration. Markets are more volatile, and global competition has only intensified. Our farmers do not need more uncertainty. They need predictability. They need policies that allow them to invest, plan, and efficiently keep their farms and ranches in their families. That is why it is so critical that we pass what I call the Farm Bill 1.0 last year. Through the Working Families Tax Cuts, Republicans' majorities in Congress delivered the most significant investment in American agriculture in decades. We strengthened the farm safety net. We modernized crop insurance. We expanded access to commodity programs. We made historic investments in conservation, research, trade, and rural development. And we delivered real tax relief to family farms and ranchers that operate on razor-thin margins. Those policies lowered the cost of doing business, strengthened risk management tools, and gave producers more confidence to keep working in the face of uncertainty. From cattle ranchers to ag lenders, Americans in agriculture truly needed those policies. In short, it helped farmers weather economic pressure after 4 years of sky-high inflation that increased input costs by more than 36% under President Biden. But the job is not finished. Farm Bill 2.0 is about continuing what we started last summer. It's about taking that running start and delivering a fiscally responsible 5-year farm bill that works for agriculture producers in the real world. The Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026 does exactly that. This week, my colleagues on the House Agriculture Committee and I marked up the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026, passing this legislation out of committee in a bipartisan fashion just a few hours ago. This bill, which I consider Farm Bill 2.0, reflects the agriculture of today, not that of 2018. It strengthens commodity programs and disaster assistance so our nation's producers are not left waiting on Congress every time drought, flood, wildfire, or disease strikes. Farm Bill 2.0 ensures dairy, livestock, and specialty crop producers have policies that match their risk. It protects crop insurance as the cornerstone of the farm safety net. It supports conservation programs that are locally led, voluntary, and practical. The Farm Food and National Security Act expands access to credit and modernizes loan limits so producers can keep up with the capital-intensive nature of agriculture today. It strengthens rural development, broadband, water infrastructure, and rural hospitals because agriculture does not exist in isolation. Strong farms require strong rural communities. And importantly, the bill is built on a bedrock of fiscally conservative policy. A farm bill should provide certainty without growing government for the sake of growing government. It should prioritize the men and women who've dedicated their lives to American agriculture instead of prioritizing paperwork. It should set up farmers for success without getting in their way, and it should respect the taxpayer while recognizing that a secure food supply is key to national security. I'm proud to say that our Farm Bill 2.0 lives up to those conservative standards. This is not about politics. It's about doing our job. Farmers and ranchers plan in seasons and decades, not in continuing resolutions and short-term extensions. Every delay makes it harder for them to make decisions about planting, equipment purchases, and land leases. Passing a 5-year bill gives producers what they need most: certainty. Certainty to invest, certainty to innovate, certainty to keep feeding a hungry world. Farm Bill 1.0 laid that foundation. Farm Bill 2.0 will continue that work. As part of my Farm Bill Impact Series, I've spoken on this floor 34 times advocating for Congress to pass a farm bill, and this legislation is exactly what I've spent so long advocating for. The farm bill that builds on the agriculture wins we passed last year, and most importantly, the farm bill that our farmers and ranchers are depending on. I call on the rest of my colleagues to recognize our bipartisan hard work and pass this legislation for the good of our farmers, our food supply, and our national security. Because when farmers succeed, America succeeds. Thank you, Madam Speaker. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life and legacy of a truly remarkable Buffalonian, John J. Heidinger, who passed away at the age of 72 on January 1st, 2026. John's presence was woven into the fabric of Buffalo, and with his passing, our city has lost a pillar in our community. To know John was to know something essential about Buffalo itself: loyalty, humor, generosity, and an unwavering devotion to the people and places that shaped him. John was born and raised in Buffalo's Old First Ward, a neighborhood defined by its character and Irish pride. And John carried that with him every day of his life. He was one of 8 children raised by Jack and Elizabeth Heidinger in a small apartment near O'Connell Avenue, where love, faith, and hard work were not just values, they were a way of life. That foundation shaped the course of John's story. John deeply believed in the power of organized labor, in the fairness, stability, and respect unions provide to working families. That conviction led him to dedicate more than 40 years of his life as an usher and ticket taker, where he stood shoulder to shoulder with his fellow union members and ultimately went on to serve as president of Local 235, which would later become SEIU Local 200 United. As president, John negotiated fair contracts, defended livelihoods, and helped ensure that generations of workers in Western New York, including me and my family, could make a better life for themselves and their loved ones. But if you grew up in Buffalo, chances are you knew John in another way too. In the early years of his career, John served as equipment manager for the Buffalo Sabres. He loved the team, the travel, the stories, the joy of being part of something larger than himself. John would even invite players, especially those far from home with nowhere to go, to his house for Thanksgiving dinner. That was John, making room at the table, always looking out for others, and always treating everyone like family. In so many ways, John was present for Buffalo's most cherished memories: Sabres games, Bills games, Bison's games, Shea's performances, Klein Hand's concerts, and the racetrack, the Yard, the Rock Pile, Pilot Field, the Ralph, and the arena. John was the familiar face at the door, the one who knew your name, the one who greeted you with a smile and made you feel welcome. But above all else, John's favorite role was being a devoted father to Michael, Suzanne, and Sarah, and a cherished papa to his grandson, Ethan. He was also a beloved friend and partner to Martha. May we honor John's memory by living with the same generosity, loyalty, and pride in where we come from that he showed throughout his life. To John's extensive family, friends, and loved ones, we hold you in our hearts. On behalf of a grateful city and on behalf of a grateful nation, may John J. Heidinger rest in peace. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. McCormick, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to discuss legislation that is near and dear to me. It updates outdated federal definitions and ensures fairness for students attending universities that serve some of the most historically underserved communities across the country. Importantly, this benefits many people with no cost. My last tour as a Marine was serving as the Marine Officer Instructor at Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, and Morris Brown as an adjunct professor. I then had the distinguished honor of attending and serving as student body president at Morehouse School of Medicine. That experience shaped not only my medical career, but also my understanding of leadership, service, and the responsibility we have to expand opportunity to the next generation. Morehouse School of Medicine was founded to give opportunities to the underserved minority population and give them access to careers in healthcare and top quality medical education. Its mission is clear: to serve the underserved. Yet for far too long, federal policy has failed to keep pace with that mission. This mission that harkens back to the core principles for the foundation of the Republican Party itself is a vital promise that we should always strive to uphold. Outdated definitions in statute have limited students at institutions like Morehouse to the resources and support they rightfully deserve. My bill has one small step to help correct that. It modernizes federal language so that historically black colleges and universities and other historically underserved institutions are treated fairly and equitably under the law that we intend. It ensures that students training to serve in rural communities, urban neighborhoods, and medically fragile populations are not disadvantaged by bureaucratic technicality written decades ago. As a graduate of Morehouse, I have seen the extraordinary talent and commitment of students who are determined to make a difference. They deserve policies that recognize their value and support their success. Morehouse's legacy is incredible. I had the privilege of learning from Dr. David Satcher, the former Surgeon General of the United States and a towering figure in public health. His leadership set a standard of excellence and service that continues to guide my work today. The broader Morehouse community has helped shape our nation through leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose moral clarity transformed America, and Jay Johnson, who served as Secretary of Homeland Security, Edwin Moses, an Olympic gold medalist who exemplified discipline and determination, Samuel L. Jackson, whose artistic achievements are recognized worldwide, and Admiral Alvin Halsey, who had a long and distinguished military career. These individuals reflect a tradition of excellence, resilience, and service. The students walking the halls today carry that same potential. This legislation is about ensuring that federal policy aligns with the legacy that we are trying to establish. This is about opportunity, and it's about strengthening the pipeline of leaders, physicians, scientists, and public servants our country so urgently needs. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and stand with students at historically underserved institutions in order to make sure every institution who meets the criteria is included in the growing and vital HBCU network of universities that are working every day to serve America's communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Liccardo, for 5 minutes. Wow, that was a whole bunch of kids.
Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of a great and a very good man, Mr. Lewis Lon O'Normadin II of Montecito, California, a beloved businessman, philanthropist, and community leader. Lon passed away in December of 2025 at the age of 91. Born and bred in San Jose, Lon graduated from Bellarmine College Prep and earned a business degree from Santa Clara University, and then proudly served our country as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He married his high school sweetheart, Peggy, and together they shared 70 years of marriage and raised a large, loving family. Following his military service, Lon Normanton carried on his family's storied business legacy, serving as president and chairman of the Normanton Car Dealership, a family business bearing the Normanton name since its founding in 1875 as a horse carriage manufacturer. Under the leadership of Lon and his kids, the dealership continued through its fifth and sixth generations, a rare achievement in America that reflects the deep bond that the Normanton family had with the community. Over more than 60 years in the auto industry, Lon earned national recognition, led dealer efforts to rebuild Chrysler alongside CEO Lee Iacocca back in the 1980s. Lon became a finalist for the National Time Dealer of the Year Award and helped lead his industry as the chairman of Chrysler's National Dealer Council and as president of Chrysler's California Advertising Association. And he was a renowned business leader in the area. He also co-founded a bank, Heritage Bank in Silicon Valley, and he was sought after for his business advice. But Lon was far better known and far more beloved for what he meant to our community and how he lived out his faith. He supported many in need with a particular passion for the education of children from struggling families. As a generous benefactor, he served on the boards of the Catholic Community Foundation, Santa Clara University, Bellarmine College Prep, Presentation High School, and Notre Dame High School. He led major fundraising efforts to build and expand build and expand Catholic elementary schools in the area, helped establish St. Francis Cabrini in San Jose, Holy Spirit School, and Sacred Heart Nativity School. Lon served the community and his faith as a longtime member of the Knights of Malta, and he was a familiar face at every 6 a.m. daily Mass. His generosity extended well beyond the church. For many years, he volunteered weekly at Martha's Kitchen in San Jose, serving meals to neighbors in need. And I would see him in there with an incredibly big smile and lots of friends joining in. He often brought his children and grandchildren along to embrace the value of service. Above all his accomplishments, I remember Lon for his kindness and his unwavering instinct for helping others and his deep devotion to his family. Lon treated everyone with respect, offered a ready smile or laugh, and sought to help anyone in need. And many came to him and to Peggy seeking help. His 6 kids went on to become great community builders in their own right. Mark, Karen, David, Lisa, Diane, and Paul. In my own youth, Lon provided me with a wonderful role model of Christian selflessness, leadership, and service. As I eventually learned, I wasn't alone in making Lon my role model. Many of my friends in the Normanton orbit felt the same way. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in celebrating the life of Lon Normanton and extending our very deepest condolences to his beloved wife, Peggy, their 6 children and spouses, 14 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. The family was the great joy and foundation of Lon's life. We honor Lon Normanton's legacy of faith, family, and service, and express gratitude for the example he set. May he rest in peace. I yield my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize American Red Cross Month, which has been celebrated every March since 1943. The American Red Cross was founded by Clara Barton in 1881 with the noble mission of serving people in need. The American Red Cross is one of the largest organizations in the country with approximately 230 chapters in the United States and close to 300,000 volunteers. American Red Cross Month was first recognized during World War II with President Franklin D. Roosevelt urged individuals to assist with the nation's growing humanitarian needs. What initially started out as a humanitarian call to action has grown into a larger mission. Now communities across the country come together to help those in need. The bond between the American Red Cross and the United States government is defined by more than a century of service. Since the organization's formal chartering in the early 1900s, the American Red Cross has had a hand in providing aid to our military personnel and their families. The organization was pivotal in assisting service members and families during World War I and World War II. During both wars, the American Red Cross recruited thousands of registered nurses and prepared millions of aid packages for the United States military and our allies. Today, the American Red Cross still provides support for military members and their families. However, their reach has extended to also serve communities that have been impacted by natural disasters. This organization assists in recovery efforts by providing emergency assistance, food, shelter, and emotional support to those in need. Many people know the American Red Cross because of their commitment to blood donations. On average, they collect nearly 4.5 million blood donations and provide almost 40% of our nation's blood. In addition to humanitarian aid relief and blood donations, the American Red Cross has been training and educating people for over a century. The organization provides training in first aid, CPR, water safety, lifeguarding, and other emergency response areas. Today, communities across the United States are safer because of the large number of people who have become American Red Cross certified. With training, these people can identify an emergency and step in to provide care. I thank all the American Red Cross volunteers who work tirelessly to serve others and care for those in need. Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, which marks its bicentennial celebration on March 15th. Jersey Shore was founded in 1826, although the borough's rich history dates to the 1700s, when families settled in the area after the Revolutionary War. Many families chose this location because of the availability of farmland. Before the borough's adoption of the name Jersey Shore, the settlement was first called Waynesburg, named after a famous Revolutionary War general, Anthony Wayne, who served under General George Washington. However, Jersey Shore quickly became the namesake due to the high number of settlers from New Jersey and the borough's proximity to the Susquehanna River. Established along the banks of the Susquehanna and near numerous state parks, Jersey Shore, also known as the gateway to the Pine Creek Valley, offers visitors the chance to hike, bike, fish, and kayak. Jersey Shore is a true reflection of Main Street charm and American values. It is an area many people from the Commonwealth are proud to call home. Congratulations to the Jersey Shore Borough on this momentum milestone. Madam Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to thank the members and the staff of the House Agriculture Committee. Early this morning, we finished up 20 hours of marking up and ultimately passing the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026. A strong bipartisan bill passed 2-1 out of committee. I appreciate all the members on the committee who contributed and helped to refine this bill, and we look forward to bringing this legislation that really serves America's #1 industry, agriculture, and all those farm families and ranch families and the communities of rural America. I look forward to getting this to the floor and ultimately to the President's desk. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Latimer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me salute the outstanding work of the Greenberg Nature Center, its professional staff, and its volunteer leadership for providing an environmental oasis for all to enjoy in the middle of a bustling suburb. The Nature Center is a 33-acre preserve just steps away from busy Central Avenue that offers hiking trails, demonstration gardens, a live animal museum with barnyard animals and other wildlife, and provides educational programs, youth camps for kids, and an annual environmental set of events that welcome the whole community. The professional team is led by Executive Director Alex Dunn, and she has spent
decades in environmental work, nonprofits in California before returning home to Westchester. She is aided by Mary Beth Cagney, Chloe DiGianni, Rosa Van Zant, Elizabeth Mulder, Greg Wegler, Andrew Michalski, and many others. The Board of Directors provides volunteer and community-based support and direction, led by President Dolia Fleck and other leaders, Jackie Pfeffer, Melissa Jones, Naomi Haber, Jim Bland, and former town councilwoman Diana Juttner. From the floor of the House of Representatives, we salute the team of the Greenberg Nature Center for its constant advancement of this valued community asset. Madam Speaker, the month of March, with St. Patrick's Day to be celebrated on March 17th, is a time to honor those of us of Irish American heritage. Across the nation, much less in Westchester and in the Bronx, there will be parades and festive dinners to salute the Irish experience and the accomplishments here in America. One such event is the 14th annual Sound Shore St. Patrick's Day Parade, scheduled for Sunday, March 22nd in Mamaroneck. This loops together the Irish in communities from Larchmont to Rye and Portchester to New Rochelle. Tonight, there is the annual Hearts and Shamrock Dinner, which was, for many, the annual scholarship fundraising effort for deserving students. And at the dinner, the parade's 2025 Grand Marshal, Matt McCauley, will turn over his sash to the parade's 2026 Grand Marshal, Joe Carvin. Joe is a resident of Portchester, a former resident of Rye Brook. He's an accomplished business executive, and he finds time yet to work with high school students in voluntary action, and he has served as village trustee in Portchester and as Rye Town supervisor. I regret being unable to join them tonight, but we salute Matt and Joe, parade leaders Joe Morrow and Michael Murphy as they celebrate together. From the floor of the House of Representatives, this grandson of Enniskillen in County Fermanagh sends our very best. Madam Speaker, I want to salute the newly installed Archbishop for the Archdiocese of New York, His Excellency the Most Reverend Ronald Hicks. Archbishop Hicks has assumed the spiritual leadership for the 2.8 million member Catholic community that includes Westchester and the Bronx, succeeding the much-loved Timothy Cardinal Dolan, who served for 16 years. Archbishop Hicks was most recently in charge of the Diocese of Joliet, Illinois, and is well known by Pope Leo, also an Illinois native, who made this key assignment. The New York Archdiocese has 300 parishes and also runs 153 schools with an aggregate enrollment of 49,000 students, runs a seminary, cemeteries, and links with various Catholic charitable organizations. A native of Illinois, Archbishop Hicks was ordained to the priesthood in 1994, served in local parishes as a seminary dean and an important assignment in Latin America before becoming a bishop. From the floor of the House of Representatives, we welcome Archbishop Ronald Hicks to New York, and we wish him great success in his pastoral services and in his church leadership. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maliotakis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. This past Monday, I joined President Trump at the White House as he posthumously awarded United States Army Staff Sergeant Michael Ollis of Staten Island, New York, the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military honor that can be bestowed. I rise to share with all of you the bravery exhibited by my district's hometown hero. On August 28, 2013, Staff Sergeant Ollis gave his life weeks before his 25th birthday, and he gave his life to save an Allied soldier during a Taliban raid on Forward Operating Base Ghazni in Afghanistan, after a truck carrying 3,000 pounds of explosive slammed into the base and terrorists advanced. Without wearing any armor, Staff Sergeant Ollis fired back, then chose selflessness and placed himself between a suicide bomber and a fellow Allied soldier. He did not pause. He did not stop to calculate. He acted, knowing that the cost would be his life. But he chose to save the life of a NATO ally, Polish Second Lieutenant Karol Serpika. Michael's courage, selflessness, and sacrifice represent the very best of our nation, earning him the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star, and Distinguished Service Cross, as well as the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of Poland, the highest Polish decoration for a foreigner. On Staten Island, we are so proud of Michael. We have a ferry named after him. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 9587 is also named for Michael. The Michael Alice Freedom Foundation supports veterans and students in his memory, continuing his legacy of service to others. But the Medal of Honor, a statement of national memory, tells the entire world and future generations the courage, the patriotism, the sacrifice, and the service exhibited by Michael Alice, all values the United States hold sacred. His final act requires no embellishment or argument. It stands on its own, resolute and selfless, and is worthy of the highest military recognition our country can bestow. We are grateful to President Donald Trump for recognizing Staff Sergeant Alice's extraordinary heroism, and today I add this tribute to the official congressional record. We congratulate his family, especially his parents, Bob and Linda, who accepted the honor, and the entire Staten Island community who worked tirelessly to ensure that the ultimate sacrifice made by our hometown hero, Michael Alice, received the recognition it deserves. He may no longer be with us physically, but he lives on in our hearts and in our minds. His valor and devotion to our nation and his fellow soldiers will never be forgotten by our proud community and by our grateful nation. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to advise and revise my remarks.
Without objection.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I make my comments on a very important issue facing our country, let us all pause for a moment to recognize those 6 Americans who have lost their lives this week and their families, realizing that they've given their all. God bless them, and our thoughts and prayers are with their loved ones. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to talk about something that touches every family as well, and every community, and that's hunger. Food, I always say in the House Ag Committee, of which I am a member, is a national security issue. Food is a national security issue. Yet too often we fail to treat it that way. When families cannot access healthy, affordable food, our communities are weaker, our economy is weaker, and our nation is weaker. If we are forced to import essential foods rather than growing them here in America, that leaves our nation more vulnerable to increasing and an unstable world that we live in today. In our San Joaquin Valley, of which I represent, one of the most productive agricultural regions in the country, farmers rise early in the morning to put food on America's dinner table. I know. I'm a third-generation farmer and proud of it. California produces over 400 commodities, including nearly half the nation's fruits and vegetables. More than 60% of over 80% of the citrus in the nation is produced in California, and 75% of the world's almonds and pistachios. Think about that, 75% in California. Yet even communities that grow so much of our food, like in my district, nearly 30% of the households rely on food assistance. It's an interesting dichotomy. Incredible food production that puts on every American's dinner table every night with the help of farm workers. Yet a majority of those households, 30% of them in my district, require food assistance. It's sad. They depend upon food support for their food. Nationwide, 48 million people face food insecurity in our country, including 14 million children in the richest nation in the world. This is unacceptable. At the same time, we know that grocery costs are up by as much as $400 a month for so many of our families throughout the country. Egg prices rose 53% over the year from January 2024 to January 2025. In 2025, a gallon of whole milk averaged $4. Ground beef prices have risen 15% recently, and are up 63% since 2020. And Americans who purchase their groceries every week know that the affordability of their food continues to get more challenging and more difficult. Last year, the United States Department of Agriculture canceled $1 billion in funding that schools and local food banks use to purchase food directly from local farmers. It was a great program, had a lot of merit. Why they canceled it, I do not know. Congress also enacted cuts totaling $186 billion in food assistance that resulted in more than 3 million people losing their food support entirely. Disgraceful. Soon after, the United States Department of Agriculture terminated the annual government report on hunger. The very report that told us that 48 million Americans face food insecurity. What's that about? Without reliable data, we are left without a clear picture on who is struggling the most in our communities throughout our country. This week, the House marked up the Farm Bill, an important effort that we are supposed to do every 4 years. We're now into 5.5 years. And we tried to strengthen the nutrition programs through amendments in legislation, but the Republicans defeated our efforts, sadly. We must stabilize farm income. We must allow producers to fall behind, whether we invest in local food systems or just let them disappear. Food is a national security, and the Farm Bill affects grocery prices, crop insurance, school lunches, rural economies. So this year we must pass a bipartisan Farm Bill, and I am doing everything I can, working with my colleagues across the aisle in the Senate. Because, Mr. Speaker, food is a national security issue. That's the bottom line. In the Central Valley that I represent, the San Joaquin Valley, families are spending over $1,000 a month on groceries. The affordability question is real. Farmers are navigating misguided tariffs policy and volatile markets, disease outbreaks. In the richest country in the world, we should not accept this system. Hard-working farmers shrinking margins while families struggle to afford their groceries. Let's support our farmers. Let's feed our families. Let's feed our children. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today with a heavy heart to honor the life and legacy of a truly remarkable man. My cousin, my friend, and true pillar of his community, Robert Bob Bakken. Bob passed away on February 15th at the age of 83, leaving behind a legacy defined by service to his family, his students, and the community he loves so deeply. You know, life and tomorrow are never guaranteed. Little did any of us realize that when I met with Steve, his son, Steve's wife Lee, and their granddaughter Charlie about 10 days ago to think about the planning of the Bob's Memorial Service, that today I would be extending condolences to Steve and Charlie on the passing of their mother Lee unexpectedly last Sunday. Again, life and tomorrow are never guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed is God's love and God's forgiveness. Born in Highland Park, Michigan, and raised in Ironwood, Bob devoted his life to learning and to helping others succeed. After earning his bachelor's degree from Northland College and a master's in education from Northern Michigan University, he moved to Houghton, Michigan in 1967. For the next 35 years, he taught U.S. history and government at Houghton High School, shaping the minds and the character of generations of young people. To many of his students, he was simply Mr. B, but to the community, he was much more than a teacher. Bob was a mentor, a coach, and someone who believed deeply in investing in young people. He coached basketball and golf, and even after his coaching days ended, he stayed involved in athletics as a referee, bringing fairness, enthusiasm, and integrity to every game he worked. He was that kind of referee on the basketball court who celebrated the players of both teams on a shot well played, and sometimes would chastise them a little bit for them being on the outside the edges of the rules. In fact, he told me a story one time. He said to his class, it was the beginning of November, and he said, November 15th here in northern Michigan is not a holiday. Just because it's the opening of deer season doesn't mean you get a day off of school. However, if a few days after the 15th, if there's some fresh venison on my desk, your grades won't suffer. That was the kind of guy Bob was when it came to engaging his students and celebrating life as it was meant to be for these young high schoolers. Bob believed that service to community didn't stop at the classroom door. In 1990, he stepped into public service, first on the Houghton Planning Commission and later on the City Council. In 2008, he was elected mayor of Houghton, a position he held with pride and dedication for more than a decade. Those who worked with him often described Bob as the kind of leader who brought people together. He led with kindness, wisdom, and an optimism that made others believe in the future of their town. He was the kind of person who knew everyone, encouraged everyone, and celebrated every success, big or small. But to our family, Bob was something even more important. He was a steady presence, someone who cared deeply about the people around him. He faced life's hardships with strength and grace, carrying forward with the same generosity of spirit that defined him. Bob loved his family, and one of his greatest joys was being a grandfather. He took pride in watching that next generation grow, just as he had taken pride in helping the generations of students find their way. And as his granddaughter, Charlie, heads off to Miami of Ohio this fall, I know she's going to take the memories of her grandpa with her and celebrate that every day. Mr. Speaker, communities across this country are built by people like Bob Backen, people who quietly dedicate their lives to others, teachers who inspire, coaches who mentor, local leaders who step forward not for recognition, but because they care deeply about the place that they call home. Bob embodied the very best of Michigan's Upper Peninsula: hard work, humility, kindness, and an unwavering commitment to community. His impact will live on in the countless students he taught, again, the athletes he coached, the city he helped lead, and the many people whose lives were better simply because they knew him. And whenever you hear the song Sweet Caroline, you think about Bob humming that somewhere and leading the chorus. That was his song, and I'm sure he's still singing it up in heaven now. I will always be proud to call him my cousin and friend. May his memory be a blessing and an inspiration to all who knew him. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, today I rise to talk about the investigation and horrific crimes of Jeffrey Epstein. About a week ago, I attended President Clinton's deposition in New York last Friday. This deposition raised even more questions about President Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Let me explain why. First off, of course, President Clinton said that President Trump flew on the plane. But not just that, President Clinton also recounted a conversation he had with President Trump about Jeffrey Epstein on a golf course in New York in the early 2000s. He said that President Trump had told him that the reason him and Jeffrey Epstein had fallen out had to do with a real estate land dispute. This directly contradicts information that President Trump has stated in the past. He has claimed that their falling out was over spa workers at Mar-a-Lago. We also know that his own Commerce Secretary, Secretary Howard Lutnick, is in the files as well. Despite this, the president contends that he doesn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's crime, and the questions are, if you don't know anything about the crimes, how do you know that Howard Lutnick is innocent, as the president has stated multiple times? I also have unanswered questions about President Trump's Mar-a-Lago club. President Trump himself said that Jeffrey Epstein stole many of the women who worked at the spa in Mar-a-Lago. I made a motion in the Oversight Committee to subpoena documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and Mar-a-Lago. No Republican on the Oversight Committee supported my motion. Republicans on the Oversight Committee wanted to spend our time talking to Secretary Hillary Clinton, and if we're calling spouses before the Oversight Committee, why haven't we talked to Melania Trump yet about what she knows? There are still many questions that need to be answered, and I'm proud that yesterday the Oversight Committee issued a subpoena to Pam Bondi. We will hold her accountable for what is obviously a cover-up and her withholding many of the Epstein files. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to chat about what I've been doing at the Department of Justice. Many members have been going to the Department of Justice to view the Epstein files unredacted. Many of the files I've looked at were still redacted, even ones without victims' names in it. And some of the files I went to look for are no longer accessible and actually have been removed from the website. We know these files existed, but they've been scrubbed by the DOJ. Americans are tired of the corruption. They're tired of a tiered justice system where, depending on how big your bank account is and how connected you are, will have a direct outcome or will directly impact the outcome of your case. They want transparency. And so I took online to Reddit and different websites to ask folks what I should look at and what they wanted transparency on as far as the Epstein files were concerned. Here, I wanted today to come to the floor to share some of the files that people online have asked me to look into. The first one was this file that talked about a torture video. This right here is an email. The email belongs to Sultan Ahmed bin Sulaim, and that is who this was sent to. The next one has to do with an email that says, "Did you know somewhere in the hills outside Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex." This is from a fake email right here, dfd42299@protonmail.com. And then at the bottom down here, they're arranging for a Bitcoin to be sent to a wallet address. I'm actually going to read that address out loud. 3CR9T PVER, EGEG4ZG, HPEDZ, MC94HZUUSCBHN. One of the other files people asked for some transparency on had to do with the Federal Bureau of Investigation CHS reporting document. This is still redacted. Even when I went into the DOJ and clicked the button to unredact it, it was still redacted. I was told they received it this way. The next one has to do with a diary of drawings and collages. Something that could definitely give us some more information that could be useful. This is also still redacted. There are many pages from the diary all redacted. Of course, we need to keep the victims' names from being made public, but Congress has a right to investigate this important information. One of the files that folks asked me to look into is about Donald Trump. Jeffrey Epstein forwarded an email to Ghislaine Maxwell. This email was from Jack Goldberger. Okay.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Yocum, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we lost a giant. Growing up in South Bend, Coach Holtz was more than a football coach. He was a living legend. When I was young, my family took me to a Notre Dame hockey game, and we were walking up late, so there was nobody else around. And appearing out from the shadows, you could see the silhouette of Coach Holtz. My father asked if he had a moment to say hello and sign autographs for us. The coach could have just blown us off, but he didn't do that. He walked straight up to me, got down on one knee, stuck out his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Coach Holtz. What's your name?" That moment for me became a lifelong lesson. It taught me that no matter who you are or where you go in life, you're never too important to say hello to someone that wants your time. That's exactly who Coach Holtz was. A national champion, a Hall of Fame coach, sure. But even more importantly, he was an extraordinary person. He's someone who brought out the best of people. He got more out of people than they ever believed possible. He inspired them to be the best that they could be, and he set a high standard of excellence that the people around him could only hope to achieve. Sally Ann and I lift up the Holtz family in our prayers. Thank you, Coach, for the memories. Thank you for your positive influence on the South Bend community and Notre Dame at large. Go Irish. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Sykes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we come off the observance of Black History Month, we are reminded of a story of courage, scholarship, and action that helped reshape how America understands its past. Black History Month began with the work of Carter G. Woodson, who believed that contributions of African Americans must be visible, taught, and celebrated. In 1926, he created Negro History Week to highlight Black achievement and make space in our nation's story for those who are often ignored. But it was Kent State University, my alma mater, in 1969 and 1970 that students decided that 1 week was not enough. Black students and educators argued that history this rich and important deserved at least a full month. Students from the Black United Students Organization proposed expanding the observance into what we now know as Black History Month. In February 1970, Kent State became the first campus to celebrate a month-long event, 6 years before it became a national observance. As someone who attended Kent State and studied in Oscar Ritchie Hall, I know firsthand the power of students demanding more truth, more justice, more inclusion. Their voices shaped one of many national movements, showing how change can start with those who are willing to speak up. Although February has ended, the lessons of Black History Month do not end with it. History shapes our identity as a nation, good, bad, and everything in between. When we know the struggles and triumphs of those who came before us, we understand our collective journey towards justice. Black history is American history, and leaving any part out makes our story incomplete. The close of Black History Month is not a conclusion. It is a continuation. It is a reminder to confront inequities in education, economic opportunity, healthcare, voting rights, and justice. True justice requires more than just recognition. It requires change. It requires action. Even as the calendar turns, the call remains the same. Lift every voice, celebrate achievements, confront injustice, and teach future generations a history in the need for diversity, equity, inclusion, and unity. As we reflect on Black History Month here on the House floor, I ask all of my colleagues to recommit to these principles, because when we expand the story of our history, we expand the promise of our future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the Greenville, North Carolina United States Army recruiters and those across the country, they're working hard to get the job done every single day. My son Justin has arrived now at Fort Benning, Georgia, to become an infantryman. He went from carrying our nation's flag to now answering the call to protect it. Inspired as a child and from his 4 years in JRTC with the Ram Battalion at Green Central High School in Snow Hill. I recall a few months back, he called me and he said he wanted to talk to me about something. And I said, son, what is it? He said, Dad, I wanted to join the Army. I said, well, son, you know I was in the Air Force, right?
And he said, yes, I do, Dad. He said, but I want to join the Army, and you're not changing my mind. I said, well, son, what is it that you want to do? He said, I want to be an infantryman. I said, son, you do understand the risk? And he said, yes, Dad, I understand the risk. And he went on to say something very moving and profound. He said, Dad, I listed my brothers as my beneficiaries. Later, he shared that after praying, he went in and took the oath of office with his Bible in his pocket. And by the way, I saw that Bible later. It was a camouflage Bible, but the words were the same. As his father, I said to him, son, I love you. Serve us well. And I found in me to say, Hoo! Mr. Speaker, I pause to give a special shout out in recognition to Major Morales, Sergeant Penhallow, his ROTC instructors, to Sergeant Head, who was really instrumental in sharing with Justin about the Army, Sergeant Young, who reminded all of us that you don't just recruit soldiers, but you recruit families. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I must admit that I'm a proud father. I'm a proud father. Decisions that I make serving on the House Armed Services Committee have become just so personal. But I want everyone to also understand, I can't be willing to ask any parent across this country to send their son or daughter without giving mine. The last words that Justin shared with me before he was leaving, he said, Dad, I'm going to make you proud. To my colleagues, oh God, he has more than made me proud. To all the recruits who are shipping out to serve our country, and especially right now during these challenging times. I was taking them to MAPS in Raleigh. This was over the weekend. But during these challenging times, I want to thank every single recruit with all of my heart. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to serve our country. Thank you for your love for America. And to every recruit, I share the same words that I shared with my son. Be strong and be of good courage and be all that you can be. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, a legend was called home. Lou Holtz passed away, surrounded by his loving family, and I know Coach, if he had to choose, wouldn't have it any other way. Coach Lou Holtz will forever be a national treasure. He's a Hall of Fame coach, and he earned it. And he was born in modest means on January 6, 1937. His parents, Andrew and Anne Marie, raised him near a small mill town in West Virginia, right on the border in Liverpool, Ohio. Coach went on to play linebacker. I think he probably was 135 pounds soaking wet, but he was a linebacker at Kent State. And he used to joke about, when he would give some of his great speeches, that he graduated third in his class, third from the bottom, not the top.
And he went on, and when he's 34 years old, he was one I believe was to appear on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He wanted to be a head coach. He wanted to win a national championship and many other goals. He achieved, if he didn't achieve all of them, he achieved nearly all of them. He became a head coach at William and Mary, then at North Carolina State, and then 1 year with the New York Jets when Joe Namath was there. That didn't go too well, so his calling was back in college, and he went to the University of Arkansas. He had wild success there, and then the University of Minnesota. And in his contract, he could leave for one school, and that school was the University of Notre Dame. And we won a national championship there in 1988, a very special time. Coach Holtz coached many great Americans. Byron Spruill, Pat Eilers, Rod West, Tony Rice, Derek Brown, Reggie Brooks, Ricky Waters, Jerome Bettis, Steve Berline, Andy Heck, Ron Meyer, James Dillard, Antoine Lark, and one of 1,500. I got the privilege to, I used to joke, I didn't necessarily play for Coach Holtz, I practiced for him. But Coach used to say you should have 4 things in life: something to do, someone to love, someone to believe in, and something to hope for. And I want to share with you all, he was in hospice. He passed away yesterday. But, you know, when you're in hospice, you know the end's coming. And this is what I shared with Coach Holtz. I sent him a text last month. I'm going to read it to you. Coach, I'm sitting in my office in the U.S. Capitol, and I know one thing for certain. I wouldn't be here right now had I not crossed your path. In short, you're a legend, and I love you. I had the honor of introducing you about a half dozen times over the last decade or so. And if you read Coach Holtz's bio, it's going to tell you that he has 2 sons. But that is wildly inaccurate. He has 1,502 sons. That's how Coach's players see him, as a coach, a mentor, a friend, and very much a second father. Coach, you demanded the best from all of us and taught us to dig deep and reach our full potential. You taught us not to exist, but to live, not to wallow, but to thrive, not to just dream, but to act. You taught us to take hold of our own futures and fates. So many of us did just that. I oftentimes share with people that you came out and did a fundraiser for me in 2018 when I was running for the Texas Senate. And I share that not to name drop or to impress people, but to share the person that you are. You refused payment. You flew from Florida to Texas to help a reserve player that you had coached 30 years prior. That's who you are. Generous beyond measure and a great American patriot of our republic. You are to be admired and emulated. Coach, you inspired us to be the men the good Lord made us to be. I was reading the other day that at some point, for most of us, there will come a day when our name will be spoken for the last time. For most of us. Not for you. Your name will live on for eternity. Because you're a legend. And you know what, Coach? Damn it, you earned it. Coach Lou Holtz, God bless you. And Coach, thank you. I yield.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
there with my wife. Any young girls there? No. May have been children of guests, but that's it. Trump specifically asked Garton to advise us of the interview. Brad had also previously talked to a manager at Mar-a-Lago. Bernd Lempt confirmed J.E. never asked to leave Mar-a-Lago. That's this document, the final one that we'll report on today. The Department of Justice is still sitting on about 3 million files. They continue to pull things back and hide them every day. The government is lying to us, and we'll continue to fight till we have full transparency.
The
Thank you.
gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
DTE Energy is out of control. They are requesting another outrageous rate hike just days after state regulators approved $242 million in increase, an increase of 4.6% per customer. This is our residents getting their utility costs increased. Our families can't afford higher rates with more power outages that wipe out groceries, spoil our medicines in our refrigerator, leave our neighbors without critical medical services, all because DTE in Michigan would rather spend money on campaign contributions than invest in reliability. DTE doesn't even care about reliability because they care about record profits and pay for shareholders and executives. The company, Speaker, made $1.5 billion in profits last year. This is unchecked corporate greed. DTE already charges some of the highest rates in the nation, but provides unreliable service and performs hundreds of thousands of utility shutoffs per year. And guess who subsidizes those shutoffs, Mr. Speaker? LAHI program, the taxpayers. So enough is enough. DTE Energy needs to be checked and held accountable.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the leadership of President Acebo, the 13th president of New Jersey City University in Jersey City, a proud Hudson County native and the first-generation son of Cuban immigrants. President Acebo grew up in Union City and now leads one of our state's most vital Hispanic servant institutions, now the youngest president ever to head a public university in our state. When he stepped into leadership, NJCU faced a $22 million deficit and a physical emergency. In less than 2 years, he stabilized the university's finances and restored confidence in an institution that serves working families across New Jersey's 10th. But his leadership goes beyond balance sheets. Under President Acebo, NJCU ranks #1 in New Jersey for social mobility, expanding transfer access, increased enrollment, and reaffirmed its mission to make higher education affordable and accessible. President Acebo's story reflects the very students NJCU serves, resilient and rooted in community. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1095, I call up the bill H.R. 7744, the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act 2026, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7744, a bill making appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1095, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLario, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. Once again, we are here on the House floor amidst a partial government shutdown. The bill before us isn't new. In fact, we debated this very same bill just 2 months ago. It reflects the bipartisan, bicameral agreement that Senate Democrats at the last minute failed to honor. Shutting down the Department of Homeland Security over a partisan fight hasn't changed the stakes. But maybe, knowing how critical it is to keep the homeland safe at this heightened moment, Democrats will side with reason and protecting the nation. No matter the question, shutdowns are never the answer. I know my colleagues think by shutting down the government, they are somehow punishing Donald Trump for winning the election. But President Trump is not the one feeling the pain of a shutdown. They are punishing the TSA agents who are working hard to keep their community safe. They're punishing FEMA employees who are trying to help Americans fighting through these winter storms. They're punishing the cybersecurity analysts at CISA who are combating constant threats to our infrastructure and electric grid. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees in critical national security positions are being forced to work without pay. Their jobs leave no room for error, but they're being asked to continue that critical work with the added stress of not knowing when they'll receive their next paycheck, not knowing if they'll be able to put gas in their cars or food on their table. A few weeks ago, we heard from TSA Acting Director McNeil at an appropriations hearing. She talked about the impact of the longest shutdown in history, which was also initiated by Democrats. She told us about agents sleeping in their cars in the airport parking lot rather than spending money on gas to drive home because they couldn't afford it. Officers who sold their blood and plasma or took second jobs with what little spare time they had just to have money to feed their families. These hardworking families are just now barely recovered from the previous shutdown antics, and they are once again in the same confusing and undeserved position. Closing down or shortchanging federal agencies is irrational and irresponsible. This isn't something anyone should be proud of. It breaks my heart to hear of these stories. We know that shutdowns cause pain and uncertainty for the nation. Personally, I would find it unconscionable if my vote was the reason someone was sleeping in their car, or if my vote was the reason someone couldn't pay their mortgage this month. This isn't a game. These are real people and real lives. In addition to the astoundingly negative human impact this shutdown is having on men and women who work for DHS, it's directly impacting our ability to keep Americans safe during heightened national security threats. In-person trainings at the National Fire Academy, the National Emergency Training Center, and the Center for Domestic Preparedness and the National Disaster and Emergency Management University have been canceled. The FEMA Disaster Relief Fund has a low balance, and the account will continue to be drained without new appropriations. Wait times at our nation's airport are already increasing as staffing strains hit the TSA workforce. There will be no new national flood insurance policies processed impacting Americans buying homes. CISA operates at limited capacity with the majority of the workforce furloughed. Meanwhile, Iranian, Russian, and Chinese cyber actors continue targeting U.S. networks and critical infrastructure. While Coast Guard service members received their most recent check, civilian personnel are working without pay. Homeland Security investigators who investigate wide-ranging illicit activity like drugs and weapons smuggling, as well as human trafficking, are not moving forward. These limitations on our national security capabilities should concern us all. There's no reason to vote against this critical funding for our Department of Homeland Security at such an important time for our country. I urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote yes to end this shutdown and to keep our nation safe. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume here.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
I rise in opposition to the bill. Let us face facts. The bill we are considering today has no chance of becoming law. It has already failed once. It will fail again. Republican leadership is aware of this, but they still have chosen to waste our time on political theater, while President Trump's aimless, endless, and costly war with Iran puts American lives in danger. Whether it is from crises abroad or masked agents at home, President Trump and Republicans are putting Americans at risk. Democrats are fighting to keep our communities safe, both from foreign adversaries and out-of-control federal agents. If the Republicans are actually serious about the threat that President Trump's war with Iran has caused, then they should move quickly to bring up my bill, which they rejected, which would fund FEMA, TSA, the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, federal law enforcement training centers, Science and Technology Directorate, the Office of Inspector General, Federal Protective Services, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, while setting funding for ICE and Customs and Border Protection aside as negotiations on those issues continues. There is broad agreement on funding for these agencies. There's no controversy over funding disaster relief or aviation security, or making sure the men and women of the Coast Guard and the Secret Service are paid. What there is a significant controversy over, however, is how ICE and Customs and Border Protection have beaten, detained, harassed, and even killed law-abiding U.S. citizens with zero accountability. So I ask my colleagues across the aisle, why not allow funding for the parts of Homeland Security over which we have no disagreements to pass? Allow disaster relief fund to be replenished. Allow TSA and Secret Service agents to be paid. Allow the Coast Guard to support its service members. Ensure our cybersecurity measures are in place, while we continue to negotiate the reforms to ICE and Customs and Border Protection that the vast majority of Americans want to see enacted. Republicans have called these reforms radical, unreasonable. I would like to know which reforms specifically they feel are out of line. Let me tell you where there is a broad support for these, and do they oppose? Do they oppose prohibiting the detention or the deportation of U.S. citizens? Are they opposed to that? Are they opposed to requiring agents to get a warrant from a judge before kicking in someone's door? Are they opposed to removing masks, requiring badges and identification on uniforms? Are they opposed to prohibiting operations at sensitive locations like schools, medical facilities, houses of worship? Are they opposed to allowing independent investigations into wrongdoing? And are they opposed to ending racial profiling and ending roving patrols? Those are the discussions that are underway. Let us continue to do that. And are they really willing to block funding for the rest of the Department of Homeland Security because they believe so strongly that these armed federal agencies marauding our streets, armed and terrorizing our communities, they believe that they should be allowed to hide their faces as they patrol our streets? They believe that that's the case. Mr. Speaker, these reforms are fundamental. They are the same standards that law enforcement all across this country abide by. They protect our communities, they protect law enforcement, and they protect our basic constitutional rights. I encourage my Republican colleagues not to let their opposition to these necessary and overwhelmingly popular reforms stand in the way of funding the rest of the Department of Homeland Security, especially now, as President Trump's war with Iran has put Americans at risk. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Nevada and chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Amadei.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to my colleague, the ranking member on the other side. As the chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, obviously I rise today in strong support of the fiscal year 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. Later today, we will vote on this bill for a second time in 2 months. It shouldn't be necessary
the committee negotiated a full-year bill on a bicameral, bipartisan basis. Our bill includes reforms like funding for body-worn cameras, negotiated amongst both sides, both houses. De-escalation training, something else that we've heard about. Democrats continue to insist on proposals which would prevent the enforcement of immigration law. So it's disappointing that we must cajole our colleagues to support this bipartisan bill once again. But here we are. The Department of Homeland Security has now been shut down for more than 3 weeks with no apparent end in sight. Let's really talk about, just for a second, why we're here. One of the biggest successes of the present administration is what they've done on the border and what they've done in terms of ending unlimited immigration from the previous administration and how they're trying to clean that up. That is a phenomenal sore spot amongst some of my colleagues. And you know what? Why are we here with this? Why are we ignoring TSA and all the stuff you're going to hear throughout this? We've got Secret Service, we've got FEMA, we've got all of these things going on, Coast Guard. Why are we ignoring all those? Because the thing that really upsets them is the success on the number one issue that this administration ran on, which was cleaning up the border. So now, when you've got some operations in the Twin Cities that are under investigation, it's like, here we go. We can fix on this, trying to take the plum so far of this administration's accomplishments. And there are many. So here we are until we get to a point where we can move on to something else and, forget the wall's still being built. There's plenty of money for operations with ICE, all of those things, but we're doing political stuff. And I get it. I understand it. I just don't understand how that gets to the top of the rail. When there's been reforms, been quiet up in the Twin Cities for a while now. There have been pivots made. So while utility bills, mortgages, car payments, and grocery bills don't stop coming because the Senate has decided to hold this bill hostage, we sit here and struggle through and hope that people can struggle through in all the other homeland areas that are on hold. So what I would tell you is this: vote yes, end the shutdown. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield, Mr. Speaker, 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, the distinguished ranking member of the Defense Subcommittee, Ms. McCollum.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, while it fails to address the dangerous and illegal activities from DHS agents in Minnesota that we have witnessed since the Operation of Metro Surge, and they're still going on. Our neighbors were racially profiled, detained without cause. Peaceful demonstrators were threatened and harassed, continue to be. American citizens were assaulted and kidnapped from their homes and even killed in our streets. Democrats are calling for common sense reforms that protect our communities and our rights. We want ICE and agent borders to follow the same rules as our local law enforcement. Identify yourself, use your body camera, get a real judicial warrant when you enter a home, and establish a policy clearly for use of force. When DHS agents engage in illegal or dangerous behavior, we want independent investigations to hold them accountable. I will not vote for more funding for ICE or CBC until this Congress includes those reforms, period. Republicans should allow a vote on Ranking Member Delores' bill that would separate ICE and Border Patrol and Secretary Noem's office while we negotiate real reforms. It would fund the law-abiding components of DHS, like the Coast Guard and FEMA and Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agent, known as CISA. CISA works to protect our critical infrastructure, our emergency communications, and our election systems. In Minnesota, when we learned that the hard way, when St. Paul suffered a major cyber attack last system, it took us weeks to recover. I'm puzzled by Republicans in this bill would cut $268 million from CISA. We should be increasing money for cybersecurity, not reducing it, and I urge my colleagues to vote no.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to my very good friend, the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim.
The gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman, for yielding. Today, we are in a battle for the safety and security of every U.S. citizen. Threats against our nation are at an all-time high, and our adversaries are actively looking for weakness. And we are putting ourselves in harm's way by not carrying out the most basic function of government, protecting the homeland. This is not a political game. TSA officers are working without pay while protecting our airports. Coast Guardsmen are risking their lives at home and are active in the Persian Gulf. FEMA coordinators are operating with limited resources as we get closer to wildfire season. Federal law enforcement is securing our borders against narco-terrorists. But thanks to Democrat dysfunction, none of these patriots will see their paychecks this month. We already learned this in October. Our homeland security should never be used as a bargaining chip. I urge my colleagues to choose patriotism over partisanship and fund the Department of Homeland Security immediately. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramania.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm a little confused why we're still having this shutdown and still having this debate, because House Democrats have been very clear about what we want. We just want no more mass agents and warrantless break-ins. And we also have a bill that would fund the important parts of DHS, like FEMA and like other parts of it. But what we don't want is to be funding private planes for the secretary. And what we want is some accountability for ICE and transparency. This is what the American people want. But I want to remind us about who's actually prioritizing safety, because it's this administration that actually fired a lot of people that were cybersecurity experts. We're now in a war where cybersecurity is at the forefront. They fired a lot of people who were in counterterrorism, and now there's a 22-year-old running counterterrorism for our country, and now we're in a war with a country that specializes in terrorism. And meanwhile, Secretary Noem has spent millions on personal planes. The American taxpayers want accountability for their tax dollars, and they deserve better. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. McKenzie.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Cole, for yielding that time. For nearly 3 weeks, the key pieces of the Department of Homeland Security have been shut down, and families face uncertainty about their paychecks. This is happening because some in this chamber are choosing to play politics at a time when the work of DHS staff is urgently needed, and despite having negotiated this bipartisan agreement themselves. Today, some DHS components are operating at limited capacity. Trainings are halted, long-term planning is paused, and only bare minimum essential services are being continued. This is not sustainable for our national security. While some have chosen to politicize this debate by exclusively focusing on ICE, this ignores the fact that DHS is responsible for a wide range of responsibilities that are essential for our national security. TSA officers stand on the front lines every single day to secure our skies, yet they're working without paychecks. The Coast Guard can fully execute marine security if they had funding, but search and rescue operations, drug interdiction missions, all of those are in jeopardy because, again, of the opposition from the other side. FEMA's disaster response and recovery efforts are scaled back as severe weather and emergencies approach. CISA, our nation's cyber defense agency, is operating at limited capacity during heightened global tensions. The Secret Service faces constraints in protecting our leaders.
An additional minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
And all of this again, is after the other side voted in a bipartisan way, supported this effort initially, and then pulled back their support because of politics. It is despicable what we see happening going on in our budgeting process here in Congress. We should stand up right now at a time more than ever to protect the American people and protect our homeland by providing this funding. It's time to put the politics aside, support the men and women who protect our nation, prioritize that safety of the American people, and that means ending this shutdown, passing the bill, and fully restoring the operational readiness of the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
I would just say to the gentleman about who's playing politics, his words are really disingenuous. Fund my bill. Let's pay these federal employees. Let's pay them all. That's what they deserve. They are working hard. And you want to protect the American citizens? Protect them from ICE and fund the alternative and pay people who are working hard. I'd like to yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Financial Services and General Government Subcommittee, Mr. Hoyer.
I thank the
recognized.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Mr. Chairman, ICE agents are being paid. Border Patrol agents are being paid. The representation to the American people that somehow we've shut down the agents of ICE is not true. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm told. And the weeping and gnashing of teeth that I hear from some of your colleagues, they can fund right now, through a unanimous consent, all of the people that you are lamenting are not being paid. You have it in your power, or the Speaker has it in his power, to agree to a unanimous consent to pass the gentlelady's bill. And everybody that you're wringing your hands about, not you, sir, Mr. Speaker, through you, the hands are being wrung, are totally without merit. We will vote for, and by the way, we did not vote for the Department of Homeland Security on our side. There were 7 of us. The rest of us voted no because we didn't agree with what the Department of Homeland Security in ICE, and not TSA, not Coast Guard, not the other agencies, but ICE and CPB. We don't agree with what they're doing. But what you're doing, Mr. Speaker, on that side of the aisle, is to hold everybody else hostage for a bill that we did not vote for. So stop saying we made some deal. Our deal was to separate it out, and we were against it. That was the deal. And that's what I did. I voted for all the rest of the bills, as my side did, and I voted against Department of Homeland Security because we want what they're doing stopped to protect the American people.
Gentleman, an additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman's recognized.
So I say to my friends who keep wringing their hands like Pontius Pilate that somebody is not paying them, the people who are not paying everybody other than CPB, and who are being paid out of a huge fund that they have available to them, are the people that you will not let go. We're for funding everybody but the 2 agencies we have mentioned, and we have a difference of opinion on. Pontius Pilate
Gentleman's time has expired.
could not rid himself.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I reserve at this time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Republican bill today has no chance. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It has no chance of becoming law. It failed before, and it will fail again. On the other hand, my bill to refund FEMA, TSA, cybersecurity, the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, and other law-abiding components of the Department of Homeland Security while negotiations continue on ICE and CBP, is the most viable path forward. It is the best way to respond to those hard-working federal employees in those agencies. If Republicans are serious about funding the vast majority of the Department of Homeland Security, as President Trump's open-ended war with Iran puts Americans at risk, they must bring it up for a vote immediately. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would have replaced the text of the doomed Republican proposal with the text of my bill to fund the parts of the Department of Homeland Security over which there is no disagreement. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment, and I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for the motion to recommit.
Without objection.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would advise my friend I'm prepared to close whenever she is.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
And I am prepared to close as well. Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot today about the federal workers who are impacted by this lapse in funding. And I have to say, I am surprised to hear so many of my Republican colleagues suddenly express such ardent concern for the fate of federal workers. Where was this concern when President Trump and Elon Musk decimated the federal workforce last year? Where was the concern when they drove close to 1,000 cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency employees? That was 1/3 of the staff out of our nation's leading cybersecurity, the agency. Where was the outrage when President Trump proposed slashing funding for the same agency by $500 million? That was part of the president's budget. Not a peep from my Republican colleagues. Where were they when the Trump administration appointed a 22-year-old, an intern, to head the key Department of Homeland Security's counterterrorism, that office? I have no patience for the crocodile tears being shed by anyone who sat by as President Trump and Kristi Noem tried to eliminate FEMA entirely. People who said not a word when the White House hollowed out whole agencies without the consent of the Congress. They were silent when all of these things happened. Now, all of a sudden, they are ardent defenders of cybersecurity and others. It is nothing more, as I said, than political theater. This kind of selective sympathy often betrays a partisan agenda. If Republicans were serious this week, we could have funded every agency under the Department of Homeland Security, except for ICE and for CBP. And I will not vote for another dime for these agencies until we get the reforms that the American people want in stopping these agencies from terrorizing our communities. And by the way, we could have funded every agency under D except for ICE and CBP, who, by the way, and I talked to my colleagues, you're sitting on $140 billion from the one big, beautiful bill. Let's dip into those dollars and pay for these federal employees. I encourage my colleagues, vote no on what is a cynical attempt to extract more funding for lawless agencies because of a crisis that the president has created without an imminent threat. And I call on the Republican leadership to stop blocking my bill to fund the parts of the Department of Homeland Security upon which we all agree, And let's continue the negotiation, continue on the parts that we do not agree on. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking my very good friend, the ranking member, for participating in the debate and for working with us to get most of the government open. Quite frankly, and I want to not correct my good friend from Maryland who spoke earlier, but just provide some context. When we were in negotiations over this bill, we're in the majority in each chamber, and we asked the minority what did they need. And my friend, the ranking member, told me what she needed, and we compromised on almost every bill, all but one. And she said, and this is the form in which I would like to receive it. I think that would maximize the chances of funding most of the government. And she followed her word to the letter. And we got most of those bills through. We actually got all of those bills through because we did it. By the same token, I asked our friends, the Senate Democrats, what do you need in terms of this to be able to pass the legislation? Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything in it. It's a compromise bill. So they told us what they needed, and they wanted a package, not a separate vote, and they got exactly what they asked for and exactly what they had agreed to. Nobody got everything they wanted, but yep, this is a compromise bill. You get it to us in this form, and we can pass it. They didn't. Now, the reality is a majority of each chamber is in favor of this legislation. They were in favor of the other 5 bills, which thankfully were enacted, or we'd be in the middle of a complete government shutdown. Now, the majority of both chambers have voted for this bill. This is a case of the minority deciding to hold the majority hostage. No legislative majority is ever going to agree to that. My friends would not agree to that. I was here when we were debating the repeal of Obamacare. We adopted a similar strategy to what Senate Democrats are pursuing today. And note I said Senate Democrats. Didn't work. I didn't think it was very smart. We brought whole sections of the government out to reauthorize. We could say exactly what our friends are saying today. Well, gosh, you're not for shutting down the Department of Defense. You're not for this. You should vote for that. They didn't vote for any of it because they said they weren't going to be blackmailed, and they also said that that was nonsensical to pick and choose which of the different agencies and particular departments we would keep open. They were right about that. But they're now pursuing exactly what Republicans did and exactly what they condemned so vociferously, and I would say correctly, at the time. This is legislative blackmail, and the people that are being hurt are the people, that have nothing to do with this dispute. That are doing their jobs. The people at FEMA, the people at TSA, elements of the Coast Guard, the civilian elements of the Coast Guard. Whole ranges of things I went through in my opening statement. There's simply no justification for it. There are negotiations going on these various matters dealing with Homeland Security. Some of them are in the bill. Body cameras, excellent Democratic suggestion. 9 times out of 10, I think body cameras show the law enforcement official is almost always in the right. But on that 10th time, you certainly want to know when they're not, so you can correct that problem. Good idea. And that was a Democratic suggestion that we incorporated in the bill. Or let's have, de-escalation training, lower tensions. Good idea. That's in the bill. There were other things we tried to get in the bill that frankly probably ought to be done just by operations that we weren't able to succeed. But we have to have a bill that can pass both chambers and be signed by the president. Now, government and appropriations, more than any other part, is a give and take item, a process. And we negotiated almost everything very, very openly and honestly. We negotiated this bill openly and honestly. It was the Senate Democrats who, after agreeing to one thing, which, by the way, is exactly what happened in the first government shutdown, and we should look at that. How'd that end up? 43 days, longest government shutdown in history. Did Democrats achieve any of their objectives? No. Now, they think they scored political points. They think it made them more popular. But did they substantially achieve anything? No. Right now, there are negotiations going on, largely involving the administration and Senate Democrats. That's fine, and I understand there's some changes being made there. We ought to allow that process to continue. We should not shut down the government. Now, this bill is substantially the same as my friend, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Amodei, said, is what we saw on this floor 2 months ago. But the situation is fundamentally different. We're in even more dangerous times. We can debate about that ad infinitum, but I don't think we should be debating as to whether our Homeland Security apparatus should be up, paid, operational, vigilant, and alert. This is the time of all times that should happen. And I think some of my friends on the other side, not all of them, but some of them will have changed their mind because circumstances are different. Frankly, we want to give them the opportunity to go ahead and vote that way if they have changed their mind. If they haven't, that's fine. They can go ahead and keep the department shut down. But it is at odds with everything they have stood for and preached, for many, many, many years. And in the end, I don't think it's helpful in moving the country forward or solving problems. I've never favored shutdowns. I've never argued for them. I've always argued against them, whether my party did it, and we've certainly done it, or the other side. Same thing's true now. So, Mr. Speaker, I think if we reflect, we should, in a bipartisan way, do what we did 2 months ago, pass this bill. Hopefully the Senate will have the opportunity to do the same thing. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. All time for debate has expired pursuant to House Resolution 1095. The previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
Bill making appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut moves to recommit the bill H.R. 7744 to the Committee on Appropriations.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
On this vote, the yeas are 372, the nays are 53, 2 recorded as present. 2/3 being the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 38, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Concurrent Resolution 38, concurrent resolution directing the President pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove United States Armed Forces from unauthorized hostilities in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The question is on the adoption of the concurrent resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 212, the nays are 219. The concurrent resolution is not adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is a question on agreeing to the motion to recommit on H.R. 7744, offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to recommit H.R. 7744, offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut.
The question is on agreeing to the motion to recommit. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Vote. The yeas are 213. The nays are 215.